Okay, in the meantime, though, we're going to talk about the game at Croke Park on Saturday night, which certainly got the Allianz Football League up and running in a big way. Dublin 113, Armagh 215 in front of 22,000. And Billy Joe Padden is with us. Evening, Billy Joe.
Good evening, Joe.
So get ready to read way too much into the first weekend of January. Here we go.
Yeah, I'm worried about Dublin getting relegated and there'll be new Leinster champions. I think that it was a great game of football to start out and exactly the way you'd want the league campaign to start for everyone bar Dublin supporters. I think it gives probably everyone a bit of encouragement to see the way Armagh were able to play in Croke Park. And I think it means that we may be looking ahead to the most unknown championship we've seen in many, many years.
Yeah, which is a welcome thing, isn't it? It's amazing across all sports how quickly and how ruthless opposition are when it comes to the aura of the great team or the dominant team, because it's very quickly that Dublin aura has been chipped away at. I would think for opposition players, the thoughts and feelings they have now going into a Dublin match as opposed to 18 months ago are completely different.
Yeah, not just 18 months ago. If you take it, Mayo going to the All-Ireland semi-final last year against Dublin, like myself included, didn't think it was possible that Mayo would win that game. And Armagh have just added another seed of uncertainty there. And I think it works both ways. It gives encouragement, obviously, to the likes of Armagh or any county that's going to go and play Dublin and Croke Park over the coming weeks, or even have a home game against Dublin. But as well, it affects Dublin also. And Dublin know themselves they are not as confident as they were. They are not as sure as what they were in everything that they do. So it has an effect on both ways.
There's a danger here. We'll just talk Dublin. So let's give Armagh their due credit first. You would know the Armagh scene very well. Kieran McGeeney has been given time to build something slowly, and he's an inspirational figure. He's brought in Kieran Donaghy of late, and they look to be in exceptional shape. So what's happening in Armagh football over the last couple of years that's resulted, I suppose, in this moment?
Well, patience. You mentioned is the first thing. They've shown patience with him. The results have not always been there. But I think what you saw the last day is that a very well prepared and conditioned team. And he's obviously looked through the county over the last number of years, picked out the players that he wants to work with. In those situations, it's never a case where you can buy a ready finished product of an inter-county player, and he has worked with them definitely on the physical side of things. When you look at that Armagh team, so big and powerful and fast, and it looked like they're built to play in Croke Park, and then you add that to the fact that some of the size they have, and then the footballing ability, whether it's Rian O'Neill, who's an obvious standout, or even Jarly O'Byrne's a great footballer as well in that middle third. Aidan Forker can play all over the field. Players that have been really, really, Kieran McGeeney has really worked with over the last 5 or 6 years, and he's starting to reap the benefits now, and they're gaining confidence more and more times. I think that it's obvious that over the last couple of years they've had lots of attacking talent. They've been involved in big games where they've scored big scores, but maybe let in big scores as well. Whereas I think the big encouragement for me and for many other people that look at Armagh closely will be how well they defended Dublin for the vast majority of that game the last day.
Well, let's hone in on that point then as a way to segue into Dublin. So how did Armagh defend Dublin? Because it's so rare that you see one, well, I say so rare, but certainly going back more than a year, certainly. But it's rare to see one Dublin not looking very assured and in control of the situation when they have possession in the opposition half. It felt like, you think of the All-Ireland final, Tyrone, where they went deep, 12 men behind the ball, 13 men, but Dublin were in total control of the situation. For the first time that I can really think of, Dublin were not in control, even though they were in possession. And the other thing which jumped out is they were taking shots from 25 metres, 30 metres, and not even, running out of ideas. Like in the first minute, Bugler had 2 wides in the first 10 minutes from distance. Howard's first point for them was from distance, and that was right from the off. So I couldn't work out if that was Armagh stopping them making inroads, or if that was a new policy of Dublin, or maybe it's just a slippage in trying to work very scoreable chances for Dublin. But that was very striking. But you might start by what Armagh were doing to stop Dublin look as assured as they often do in the opposition half.
Well, if you take Armagh, as I said, the strength of their team is around the middle, and the attacking players they have, even attacking players coming off the bench, they really probably only have Paddy Burns is probably the most comfortable man marker they had on the field the last day. So they are short in that area of the field. Aidan Forker can play all over the field. Played full back. He's an excellent footballer. I think the key thing what Armagh did is they dropped back and protected the D really, really well. They let Dublin have shots from outside the 45. They let Dublin have shots from the corner. They were very disciplined in that. They got back into a defensive shell and then they tackled really aggressively, but with discipline in those areas, not to give away too many frees. And that really protected them. I think in many ways, Dublin they ran out of ideas. They didn't show the patience they would normally have done in other years of continuing to move a team left to right, probing, then finding the man in space on the front of the D to take the right shot. Their shot selection was way off compared to what it had been under Jim Gavin. And that's something that they'll no doubt try and address over the next coming weeks. But what that did was it set up a platform for Armagh, that they were solid, that they weren't conceding scores. And then the next step of that is that they're such a good counter-attacking team because they have those good attacking players and they have really, really good foot passers to play on that counter-attack. It wasn't a running-based counter-attack. It was a long foot pass counter-attack. You look at something like Aidan Forker on the full forward line, great left boot and play a pass. If you can get the ball to Rory Grugan, brilliant kick passer. He'll play the right ball in to the edge of the square or Rian O'Neill or whoever's in there. And that's very much the way Kieran McGinney wants them to play. Croke Park is the ideal place to play like that because you have the spaces to play into. So it was very unusual, as you rightly point out, Joe, that Dublin, for maybe the first time we've ever seen, let another team dictate the terms of engagement. And that was the case right the way through the 70 minutes the last day.
Because to extend the Tyrone comparison, for instance, Armagh on Saturday night are not the first team who said, let's get men behind the ball and try and defend the D. It's just that it worked so spectacularly against Dublin. And they were shooting from distance, as we mentioned, on a couple of occasions. Costello seemed like a loss. He was the only one that seemed to be making inroads, from the D and inside, whereas everybody else seemed to get swallowed up. There was a really emphatic turnover on 33 minutes where Fenton went in and got swallowed up and had to turn around, and he kicked the ball back along the ground, falling over under pressure, and then Small took it in and he was turned over, and there were 3-4 Armagh players around Small. So why that worked so successfully is it must be on Dublin as well as Armagh here, because they are not the first team to try this. And the other thing, we didn't see that pattern, Billy Joe, of how many Dublin scores have we seen where someone comes around the corner and pops it over in space. Why, that seemed to be negated completely. It's like that old trick is gone almost.
Yeah, but I think it's personnel as well, right, Joe. Like if you look at Costello is comfortable in those situations. He can go off both feet. He works well in tight areas as well as he does in open space, and he's got a quickness to get the shots away. Whereas without Con O'Callaghan, without Dean Rock starting from the start, the other players have just not shown, Basquel and Byrne, or have just not shown a level of comfort to operate at speed in those tight situations. The other players, like Scully and Kilkenny, are really experienced, excellent footballers, but they were doing more of their work out the field and weren't really as effective. Now, Scully was okay. Kilkenny can play much better. Maybe Dublin will look back at the game and say, well, you know what, we probably should have played Kilkenny inside with Costello, because Kilkenny has shown in the recent past that he can operate effectively as a full forward. But then you're missing something out on the edges as well. And you're right, you just don't have that ball movement, that patience, that circulation of the players in the attack and third, where they all, whether it be 8-9 Dublin players, seem to be constantly moving in that area, constantly moving the ball, and then inevitably you create that chance maybe for a Fenton coming in at the end of something, and then when they did get those opportunities, uncharacteristically, Fenton dropped one short that he would normally have scored. So it's a bunch of those things went wrong for Dublin on that night. It wasn't just any one thing.
Yeah, well, that's all very interesting, actually. And so say the Fenton example where he dropped one short, and I think around that period of time as well, he turned down the opportunity to shoot. So Fenton, a hallmark of his play over the last number of years, and don't get me wrong, Fenton is and remains one of the great players, but this is an interesting situation. Fenton dropping that ball short is something we never see. He scored so many points where he runs up, seemingly no one can get near him, and he just pops it over, and he makes it look so easy. So it's eye-catching when he drops it short. One of the reasons that this is such an interesting situation now is that after the Mayo defeat, I think a lot of us anticipated a backlash from Dublin, that they would get the head down, get fit as hell, be angry, be hurt, and in the off-season have conversations about the slippages in discipline and shot selection and the minutiae which made them so great for so long, and would rectify all that immediately. And yet, if anything, those things were exacerbated by moments like Fenton dropping the ball short. So that's why, again, caveat that this is January, but it feels like this is a continuation of a slippage, and they had the circuit breaker of winter to put things right and they haven't, and that's why this feels like this is a pattern and this is going to continue, as opposed to, you know, a one-off season last year.
It must be worrying for Dublin supporters. I as well thought that Dublin would react really, really strongly, and we have to add that on a first night in the National League, you know, anything can really happen. You can prepare well and then things just don't work out. We've never seen it from Dublin before. They've always been so well organised. Even nights they haven't been playing at their best, somebody they've inevitably done enough of the right things to win the game. I think that when you look as well at the retirements, and the message that it's not all on Dessie Farrell or his coaching team, you know, the message that has been, you know, constantly delivered through that team over years and years, whether it be from McMenamin or Philly McMahon or you know, players like that. Maybe now it's a bit more difficult for Kilkenny and Fenton because they have to lead in every way, not just lead by example. They probably have to be driving forward in terms of their communication on the dressing room. And they're great players, and I fully expect them to get back to their best this summer. Sometimes you're just a bit out of form. And Fenton, over the last couple of times he's played for Dublin, from having this amazing record of never ever losing and always playing well, that he's not in his best form at the minute. I fully expect him to recover. I think that shot selection will improve. But the other thing, will they be able to be as decisive and as effective in the full forward line without the players they're missing? You know, if Con O'Callaghan doesn't come back in maybe better form than he finished last season on, well, then there probably are other teams out there that are much stronger in that area of the field. Armagh included, Kerry included. You know, even Tyrone, when you consider the players they have in the full forward line. And we mightn't have said that about any area of the Dublin team over the last number of years.
On the shot selection, on the wides, so they had 13 wides. Here's Dessie Farrell speaking to Dubs TV afterwards about that issue.
Yeah, disappointed not the start we would have wanted, but look, that's where we're at, and we just need to face facts, and we didn't perform like we would have expected to perform tonight. Notwithstanding that, it was quite noticeable that Armagh had a lot of work done, very, very fit, very well conditioned, well organised. So yeah, we were struggling at times there to be competitive, particularly in the first half, but we got to grips with it a little in the second half, but ultimately our shooting efficiency was disappointing, and that's definitely a key takeaway for us from tonight.
So I mean, look, again, we're overreacting in the most self-aware sense imaginable here. Tralee is going to be very telling.
It is because the National League, you just have to get points from your first two games. You want to make it as easy as you possibly can. The key objective for any of the teams, and this is Dublin included or Kerry, is that you stay in that division. That's the priority for everyone. When you're getting into the later stages, you think about winning it. Going down there, particularly with Kerry coming off a draw, and it's always, when Dublin have been really, really strong, it's been a close game and a difficult game. Yeah. You think that the way Armagh maybe offered some sort of a blueprint for Kerry, when you consider the strengths they have in the full forward line, Kerry can they play some of that direct football that maybe will put pressure on the Dublin full back line, put pressure on Comerford on some of those balls into the square, and will that be a way that Kerry will try and attack Dublin? Whereas I think from Dublin's point of view, they've got to get that physicality, that foothold back in the middle of the field, show the athleticism that they have, show that ball retention and possession-based game that's been better than we've ever seen from any team. And they really work on circulating the ball in the attack and third to find the right shooting chance and not to force it in any way. And if that's what they'll need to do down there, but it's going to be very, very difficult because Kerry are going to be very, very motivated to really lay down a marker at an early stage, considering that, you know, we all think that Dublin are not as good as they were. And
do you see, so you raised a point there which I did want to get your thoughts on, because you're always a very astute observer of tactics and the trends in the game. I've heard different people suggest that the days of Dublin possession as we knew it back and forth across the pitch, that's not in vogue anymore, and that's going out of fashion, and we're going to see lots of teams play more direct football, almost akin to what Armagh did. So do you think that's where we're going, or do you still envisage Dublin hogging possession in opposition halves and working scores over 2, 3, 4 minutes of back and forth?
Well, it all depends on what your opposition is going to do. I still maintain if you find yourself in the situation Dublin did in the first half the last day, where Armagh were dropping large numbers behind the ball, I don't think there's any way you can play direct there when there's that many bodies back. You have to use the possession-based game to create the openings. You obviously, the best way to counter-attack is through that long kick pass based counter-attack. It gets the ball down the other end of the field in the quickest fashion. And each team trains for that sort of counter-attack. And if you find a situation where you have a lot of your opposition players pushed up on you and you can get in behind them and play those quick passes, well then you will be direct, and that's the right coaching approach in that situation. But the way, there's no one's going to throw out the playbook in terms of your defensive strategy in getting bodies back. So if you're playing a team that gets bodies back, and I fully expect Kerry to get lots of bodies back, and you can't make those inroads in the first 2 quick passes, well then you can't risk turning it over when you're in a vulnerable situation yourself. And that's what Dublin did on some of those turnovers, handed the ball straight back to Armagh, and Armagh rightly punished them. So I still think that the possession-based game will be vitally important in situations where you're facing a deep-lying, congested defence, whereas the approach on a counter-attack will be to move the ball by the foot as quickly as you possibly can and as long as you can, albeit keeping in safe possession, bouncing it in front of an attacker as opposed to creating 50-50 contests. Okay, it's going to be an interesting few weeks. I know, just before we go, the other game that you did see was at Markievicz Park, the draw between Mayo and Donegal. Any big takeaways from that one, Billy Joe? I think the biggest takeaway out of all that would be the Donegal. Donegal would be really disappointed that they weren't able to see that out. Total control of the game, numerical advantage for the last 20 minutes with Stephen Cohen getting sent off. And really, through their own game management, they handed Mayo opportunities. Look, Mayo played much better in the second half. Aidan O'Shea came on, they did well. Great to see Jason Doherty come back. Absolutely remarkable the way he was able to play after 2 serious knee injuries and 2 years out. He led by example, got a couple of scores, maybe could have had a goal himself. And as a result, Ryan O'Donoghue and Tommy Conroy both started to get into the game in the second half in the latter stages. Whereas Mayo's standout player throughout was Robbie Hindley. Saved Mayo in the first half. It could have been a hammering really early on without Robbie Hindley making saves and contesting high balls. And then he was the man that got a point for them with an excellent free towards the end. So, Mayo come away with a point, having only really played for 15 minutes, and that 15 minutes with only 14 men. And Donegal will be kicking themselves in terms of experienced players not using the ball well when they had the advantage, with the conditions, with the extra man, not playing the game in Mayo's half, and trying to keep possession and not being able to do it. Just really, really bad decision making. Yeah. So to conclude, and you're allowed to change your answer over the next couple of weeks, no problem. For the first time in a very long time, there's no standout favourite to win the All-Ireland. I would agree completely with that. Yeah, I still think that Dublin are obviously, I think they're my favourites for it, I suppose. I think that they still can put out the best 15 there if they get everyone back fit. You get Conor O'Callaghan back into that, McCarthy back into that, you get Fenton going again. Yeah. That's a serious team to try and operate against, particularly in Croke Park and the open spaces. But you're right, when you look at the rest of Division 1 teams, even if a Galway down in Division 2, they'll all think that there's a big opportunity there to do something special this summer. Okay, brilliant stuff. Billy Joe Padden, thanks a mil. No problem, Joe.
Off the Ball on News Talk.